Hi, everybody. Thank you, Lenora. I hope you can all hear me today. I have a few prepared words to share with you, and unfortunately, they're written, so I'll have to look down from time to time to consult my writing, which I can barely read. But it is a great privilege to be invited to share with you today a few recollections at this condolence memorial in honor of the late Dr. Brij. I had the honor of working with Brij from 1995 to 1996, when he was one of the 3 commissioners on the Fiji Constitution Review Commission, chaired by the late Sir Paul Reeves, who was the former Governor General of New Zealand. Brij was one of the local members, and he was nominated by the National Federation Party's leader, then the leader of the opposition, Mr. J. Ram Reddy. The other local commissioner, as you've heard, was the late Mr. Tomasi Vakatora, a senior, who came to the commission after a long career in the public service. He'd been the Speaker of the House of Representatives and had been a government minister, so he was well versed in public law matters. Mr. Vakatora was the nominee of Mr. Rambuka, as you've heard, and Mr. Rambuka was the Prime Minister and leader of the SVT. I returned from studies in Boston to join the commission as its local legal counsel. The other legal counsel, there were 2 of us, was the experienced New Zealand constitutional drafter, Alison Quentin Baxter of New Zealand. Walter Ringamoto, who's well known to you all, was our very able secretary. Prior to joining the commission, I was well aware of Brij and his accomplishments as a historian and an academic. I remember quoting many of his sentences in my written university work in Auckland, in my essays, and I quote them verbatim because I could not find a way to summarize them in his ideas, to summarize his ideas as eloquently as the way that he had expressed them. And thank God that they did not have Turnitin in those days to go through our essays. For someone with an established reputation as a formidable academic, Brij was easy to get along with and to work with, and despite the heavy and stressful responsibility of his role. One of his earliest remarks to me was that as a historian, as somebody who'd spent his life studying, recording, and discussing history, he was excited at the prospect of making history. The commission was established, for those of you who don't know, to review and to recommend changes to the 1990 Constitution, which was decreed after the 1987 coup. The 1990 Constitution contained various provisions aimed at guaranteeing what was then known as the paramountcy of Fijian interests. These included a House of Representatives elected exclusively on communal lines, with a fixed majority of indigenous Fijian, Rutuman, and general voter seats, and a fixed minority of what were called Indian seats. It also provided for an appointed Senate, also with a fixed Fijian representative majority. The questions for the commission were whether these kinds of arrangements should be continued or replaced by something else. Brij began his work with the commission with the clear idea that they should be replaced, ideally by an open system of voting based on a common role for all. Mr. Vakatora, for his part, started with the view that the 1990 arrangements should be retained in principle, and that any tweaking should be aimed at strengthening rather than weakening Fijian paramountcy. Alison and I, as part of our roles, were available to the commissioners for private chats, and these positions of Brij and Mr. Vakatora came through very early in the process. The commission's work involved traveling the length and breadth of Fiji to hear the people. We also traveled all around the world, consulting with experts on governance in diverse multi-ethnic countries and consulting with experienced leaders and politicians in those countries. It is to his great credit that Brij approached the task with the utmost dedication and the open mind of an academic. He listened carefully to the people. Everywhere we went throughout Fiji, Brij would sit in the meetings listening very, very carefully to what people said. He would come out during the breaks and talk to the people outside. When we traveled, he questioned the experts closely, and he began to see things differently from how he saw them when he first. Recognized early on that Brij and Mr. Vakatora were the proxies for the Fijian and Indian communities, and any accommodation between the communities had to begin with Brij and Mr. Vakatora. Brij recognized this too, as did Mr. Vakatora. Fortunately, they were both amiable and open personalities. A close friendship quickly developed, and over the course of the travels and the hearings and the many, many contentious commission meetings that we had, each came to see the perspectives and the fears and the hopes of the other's community, and seeing these fears and hopes as deserving of respect. They, Mr. Vakatora and Brij, began the journey that we all in Fiji must complete. It is fair to say that Brij was the one who brought the energy and the academic rigor to the Commission's deliberations, and his tenacity and enthusiasm must be credited with moving Mr. Vakatora to the middle ground represented by the Commission's report. Reaching that middle ground took much longer than expected. Alison, Quentin Baxter, and I were tasked with drafting the report against the fast approaching deadline. Being the eloquent wordsmith and perfectionist that he was, Brij scrutinized our drafts closely, and I dreaded every morning getting his feedback. He would always demand or suggest a rewrite where I was not able to capture the essence of an idea as elegant a way as he would have done himself. He was simply not prepared to put his name to anything that was below his very high standards. Those days and nights were long and arduous. Brij, the hard taskmaster, nevertheless supervised our work in a kindly, polite, and jovial way. By the end of the process, Brij was proud, not just of the report and its recommendations, but also of the personal growth that he had achieved, the new perspectives that he had gained from the journey. He had learned, among other things, that power and responsibility look quite different when you move from the seat of an outside critic to the hot seat of a decision maker. He learned that perspectives, insecurities, and hopes that you do not share must still be acknowledged and addressed. He was proud of the history that the Commission and his friendship with Mr. Vakatora was making. The 1997 Constitution, which resulted, is now, of course, history itself. I leave it to the social scientists to discuss whether this was because of flaws in the Commission's recommendations or other factors, such as the changes that Parliament made in adopting the recommendations. For example, Parliament introduced the 1997 Constitution required a multi-party cabinet, which the Commission had strongly recommended against, and Parliament had reversed the ratio of reserved to open seats. As we all know, Brij and Padma were exiled from Fiji in 2009 after a radio interview that he gave to Radio New Zealand, which was critical of the army takeover. Sadly, he was never to return to his beloved village of Pambia in Vanuatu. Equally sad is that after 2009, the history that Brij had spent his life documenting and the history that he had helped make has effectively been erased. Pre-2006 is now effectively prehistory. It is no longer talked about, no longer remembered. Many young people are not even aware that it even happened. Brij passed away on Christmas Day, the same day as another great leader, Archbishop Tutu of South Africa. Tomasi Vakatora Jr. shared on Facebook on Christmas Day a photo of his father, Brij, and Archbishop Tutu taken at the Archbishop's home in South Africa while we were on our travels. The picture brought home to me the similarities between the two great men and the tragic contrasts. Both were champions of equality and human rights, courageous men. Both were fearless advocates. Both were also witty, boyish, charming, and cheeky as well. It also brought home the sad difference. One passed away a celebrated leader at home in his homeland. The other left us in exile, far from his beloved Tambia, celebrated all over the world as a scholar, but all but forgotten in his homeland. The challenge for us all is to rewrite our history again, to remember and honor people like Brij and the many, many other leaders who have contributed to our national history and our national life over the century. Rest well, Brij, and Padma and family, may you find comfort in this sad time. Thank you.